release deal with
Señoras y señores, muy buenas tardes, bienvenido a América XXI. Tenemos una noticia de última hora. Tenemos una noticia de última hora que estamos tratando de confirmar. La cadena de noticias británica Sky News está comunicando que el líder de Hamás, que el líder de Hamás, el señor Sinwar, ha muerto. Estamos en estos momentos tratando de lograr más información del cómo y el cuándo. Y vamos a tratar de llevarle toda la información a ustedes. Pero noticia de último minuto. Sinwar estaría muerto. Voy a tratar de traducir la información que me está llegando.
It's really hard to say because I don't know who then the negotiators would speak to on the ground in Gaza.
Hay mucha conmoción en las redes sociales también con la misma noticia. Están corriendo la voz y el líder de Hamás, Sinwar, estaría muerto. Ha sido un extraoficial en este momento en distintas cadenas de televisión de noticias. Las imágenes corresponden en estos momentos a la cadena Sky News, que es la primera cadena en el mundo que ha logrado sacar la exclusiva de que Sinwar estaría sin vida.
Ali, let me just give you a moment to check with your sources as well, because I want to bring you the latest post on X from the Israel Defense Forces on exactly this topic. I'm going to read it out in full, Ali. Look, it says, during IDF operations in Gaza, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking the possibility that one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages in the area. The forces that are operating in the area will continue to operate with the required caution. Reiterating the statement that you had brought us a short time ago, Ali, just letting us know that the IDF are investigating that possibility. It's difficult to pass some of these things, isn't it, sometimes, Ali, but you know the area well, and you know the people behind some of these statements. When it says there, in the building where they were eliminated, there were no signs of the presence of hostages. Does that give us any more insight into what kind of operation this may well have been? And are we entirely clear exactly whereabouts this operation that killed these 3 may have included Sinwar took place?
Y lograr confirmar
I don't know for sure. There are some rumors that the operation might have been in southern Gaza, around the Rafah area, but I would caution, I don't know that to be absolutely certain. So that is just something I'd heard on the side. But again, like a lot of what is coming out now, that is unconfirmed. So we'll wait for further confirmation. Now, you know, the Israelis, I suspect, if it is Sinwar, will be able to do some pretty rapid forensic testing on him. Sinwar was held in Israeli jails for a long time because of his involvement with Hamas and attacks on Israeli forces and
no habría evidencia de rehenes en el área donde se encontró estos cuerpos.
Some years back, and Sinwar was amongst more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners released. He went back into Gaza. He was born in Gaza. He went back into Gaza, and he rose through the ranks of Hamas to become ultimately its leader. And so
esta operación se habría desarrollado en el sur de Gaza.
I suspect they probably have some form of DNA that they could try and match, and I think they will be pretty keen to try and establish the facts behind this and
dando
it if
una
it does turn out to be true.
Noticia
Sinwar had learned during
extraoficial.
his time in prison, he had learned Hebrew fluently. He was an excellent speaker of Hebrew, and he did it to try and get into the minds of his enemy, the Israelis, and to understand them better. And we've heard reports from some of the hostages who have been released over recent months.
Estamos chequeando distintas fuentes para tratar de confirmar la muerte de Alia Sinwar, líder de Hamas, quien tomó el mando de la agrupación terrorista hace muy poco tiempo, después de otra eliminación a otro líder de Hamas. La noticia está dando la vuelta al mundo, señoras y señores. Estamos en vivo y en directo, 17 de octubre del año 2024. Las IDF habrían eliminado a Sinwar.
Gilad Shalit, one of 1,000 prisoners released at that time. He'd been serving 22 years for the abduction of and killing of 2 Israeli soldiers back then, but of course released, went on to then leave the military wing of Hamas, and then, as we understand, masterminded the October the 7th attack. Now, if it is confirmed that Yahya Sinwar has been killed in this operation, as you say, the military elements, the military leader would have been killed, the political leader, Ismail Haniyeh, who was over in Doha, killed in Tehran, as you pointed out, and Mohammed Daif. They are the 3 leaders before this war. Whenever you read about Hamas, who were the 3 figureheads of this, how much is this an organization that has these figureheads that then doesn't have those coming up to replace it? Is it a hydra? Is that sort of the sense of an organization like Hamas, that there are always others to replace the leadership?
Habría estado usando.
Well, I mean, as a rule, yes, but I think we should view what has happened in Gaza and to Hamas over the last 12 and a bit months slightly differently. You know, Gaza is a place that has been in parts totally flattened. I've seen it for myself, totally flattened.
Pero a todo le llega la hora.
The Israeli military occupy much of Gaza. They carry out heavy airstrikes, heavy fighting on the ground. So I would wonder, you know, to what extent Hamas would be able to find a new leader after 12 and a half months of it being fought very heavily by the IDF, and the IDF has successfully taken out so many of its command. It's hard to think who would be possible to replace Yahya Sinwar, possibly Mohammed, who I think would be the only one I can think of who is still left in that kind of upper echelon, that obviously doesn't have the reputation of his brother, certainly within Hamas itself, and most, and you know, don't forget, if this was Sinwar who was killed, there was 2 others, according to the Israeli statement, found with him. So who were they? Are they senior officials who he was with? I guess that is also an open question that we wait to find answers for. But I think it'll be very hard for Hamas to find a new leader of any substance.
Del resto de los rehenes. No se habla de haber encontrado o haber rescatado rehenes. Sí se habla de la eliminación del líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar.
And it has a political presence elsewhere in the Middle East, headquartered really in Doha, in Qatar. So there will be people
tratando de buscar más información que se puede encontrar en este momento en otras redes sociales. Voy a tratar de entrar a la información que nos puede dar oficialmente desde Israel. Pero repetimos, estamos completamente en directo. El 17 de octubre del año 2024 habría... Okay, sí.
Well, as we say, Ali, the IDF are checking on the possibility that Yahya Sinwar has been killed in this strike. It's still, at this stage, unconfirmed exactly where this strike took place. 3 people killed in an attack by the IDF. They have posted onto social media in the past few minutes confirming that they are investigating what has happened here. Let's just show you that tweet that was put onto X by the IDF in the last half an hour or so. I'll read it out in full what has been said. During IDF operations in Gaza, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF and ISA are checking the possibility that one of the terrorists was Yahya Sinwar. At this stage, the identity of the terrorists cannot be confirmed. It goes on. In the building where the terrorists were eliminated, there was no signs of the presence of hostages in the area. The forces that are operating in the area are continuing to operate with the required caution. Now, it's worth trying to pass what we're being told in this particular statement from the IDF and ISA to try and ascertain any more detail from it. I mean, it would seem that this operation is separate. Ali, would you say that's fair from sort of the air war, the airstrikes that are ongoing? It seems as if it's a building where terrorists were eliminated, suggesting that this may well, because the forces are continuing to operate in the area, may have been a ground operation that has taken place, which had allowed for the Israeli military to go in after these 3 terrorists, as they say, and are now trying to investigate whether or not one of those terrorists is Yahya Sinwar. And of course, this comes at a moment for the war in Gaza and, of course, the expanding war into Lebanon, where many of Israel's allies and partners are hoping that there will be a de-escalation in tension, not least because of the violence that's ensuing and the threat of a wider war, but of course because of the grave humanitarian situation that is unfolding in Gaza, has been unfolding in Gaza for the past recent months. Reported yesterday by the UN that no aid had managed to get into the north of Gaza, where a de facto siege has been held for the first couple of weeks of October. We have had that letter from the US imploring the Israelis to allow more aid into the north of Gaza, and there's been what is thought of as a very unusual ultimatum put in place by the US, saying that if that aid is not allowed in, that military aid in part could be cut off. So at this stage in the war, with one of the war aims of the Israelis being to destroy Hamas and make sure that it is not able to function as a force within Gaza, the news of the possibility that the military leader Yahya Sinwar has been killed will come as potentially some relief and could see us moving towards a point where the conflict in that region starts to de-escalate.
Well, I think it could be a transformative moment of Yahya Sinwar if it turns out to be true. My instinct is that the Israeli military would not put out a statement like it has done if it at least didn't believe this is a pretty high possibility. And I mean, if you look at the pictures on social media purporting to be Sinwar's body, I mean, there are some characteristics that would be common to what we know of him. I mean, he was not a person in recent months who anybody had really seen. I think there is one image of him since October the 7th, which is pretty much the back of his head, walking through a tunnel under Gaza with members of his family, wearing flip-flops, I think, and that is the only image we've seen of him. There are some marked characteristics, like his ears and his teeth that might be matched up pretty quickly. I just don't think that if there wasn't even the slightest possibility that this was him, I just don't think the Israeli military would have put out a statement like they did. But as I say, we'll have to wait official confirmation of that. I wouldn't be surprised if it came from Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, such a major moment it would be. It is hard to know what it means for the hostages in Gaza. Whilst Sinwar was, we are told, the person who was standing firm against a hostage deal and blocking a hostage deal. At the same time, he was the person who mediators were able to talk to and to an extent at least negotiate with. And so I'm not quite sure how he would be replaced in that way. You know, who would they now talk to and negotiate with? We'll have to wait and see. And what it does for Hamas as a fighting force, which is severely degraded anyway, but still remains. I mean, every day there are battles between the Israeli military and Hamas in Gaza. Hamas has shown that it has some residual capability to fire missiles into Israel. Still, it has done so on a couple of occasions over the last couple of weeks. So Hamas is not defeated by any means, but the killing of their leader, Yahya Sinwar, along with the killing of so many senior commanders over recent months, could be a major moment in this, and it could be a time where talks for a ceasefire are revisited.
Sinwar, que logró estar un año bajo tierra organizando a sus fuerzas terroristas, distribuyendo armamento, canalizando todas sus fuerzas para lograr el objetivo frustrado por Israel. Las IDF han eliminado a Sinwar. Están viendo en estos momentos ustedes imágenes que corresponden
the leadership of Hamas has been degraded, as you say, as a fighting force. It's
been
degraded. You have been, journalists can't get into Gaza, but every now and again they do get the opportunity to get inside the Gaza Strip. And I know that, as you said, you have been in recently. Can you give us a sense of what it's like as a place right now? It's important to sort of understand just how much destruction there is there, and how life could even continue going forward. We're looking at live pictures. I think that is
saber más información. Le estoy dando lo que nos está llegando.
There and buildings in the background. Yeah, as to how, Ali, how life can go forward in a place like that. And I wonder, in a vacuum, what comes next, and whether or not the long-awaited day after moment can now start to be really thought about. There was a sense in reporting it in many areas that prior to October the 7th, there was a moment where there was a chance for some kind of a grand deal, some normalization of relations with Israel and Saudi Arabia. The Saudis have often been talked about as being perhaps responsible, Saudis and other Gulf states, as to helping rebuild Gaza post-war. And I wonder whether at this point now it's way too early to get to anything inclusive, but whether there can now start to be the beginning of the thought about what could come after this.
En julio del año 2024 en Teherán, la capital de Irán. Estaba considerado la segunda figura más poderosa dentro de Hamas, tras ser designado como sucesor al frente de su oficina política, se convirtió en la persona clave de la organización. Sinwar, que nació en la Franja de Gaza, en Han Yunis, en 1962, cuando la Franja de Gaza estaba bajo el dominio egipcio, donde Sinwar pasó sus primeros años, ha encontrado hoy día repetimos, Yahya Sinwar ha muerto.
I would say that Israel would be pretty close to then sort of being able to declare a victory, for that objective. But their other objective is to free all of the hostages.
Que está escribiendo en el chat tenga el respeto suficiente, primero para el canal y segundo para el resto de la gente que lo está leyendo. No tengo tiempo para leer todo, pero lo único que quiero es que, por favor, tengamos un poco de respeto a esta transmisión que estamos desarrollando en vivo para todos.
Completely. And the other problem is that at the moment, such is the way the war is being fought in Gaza, and such is the lack of any kind of plan for what comes next. There really is a reluctance amongst
no hay mucha más de la que yo les estoy dando, pero en estos momentos podemos confirmar que la BBC de Londres también se suma a decir oficialmente
some of the Gulf states,
Yahya Sinwar
Saudi Arabia, and
estaría muerto,
but they are just
eliminado por la CIDF.
at this stage.
No sabemos cómo, no sabemos cuándo,
there is still an ongoing Israeli occupation.
Pero sí sabemos que fue abatido con otros 2 guerrilleros que estuvieron con él hasta el final. No hay antecedentes de rehenes, ni vivos, ni de los otros. No hay antecedentes de rehenes. Y nosotros no vamos a dar ninguna información que se pueda llegar a estar especulando en las redes sociales, sino que vamos a dar información que cualquier persona puede contrastar en los distintos medios de comunicación. Han pasado muchas cosas durante los últimos días, durante las últimas semanas, pero debo reconocer que, habiendo seguido tan cerca la información que ha pasado en Israel, esto no me lo esperaba. Esto me cae como un balde de agua tibia, no puedo decir que es fría, es tibia. Y es tibia porque tenemos que entender el trabajo que ha hecho Israel por lograr controlar, neutralizar. Y decirlo concretamente, rescatar a esas 101 personas que estaban disfrutando de una fiesta y que se les arrebató la vida de ellos y la de sus familias injustamente. Señoras y señores, Gaza en este momento está en caos.
Let's just take you through who
Las
Sinwar
calles están
Well, the 61-year-old was led Hamas
alborotadas.
since 2017. He joined the group
Y es muy
in the early
probable
1980s.
que sea
He
muy
spent more than
entendible
20 years in Israeli
esta
prison for
sensación
killing both
contradictoria
Israelis
que
and
pueda tener el pueblo
Palestinians suspected
gazatí.
of collaborating with Israel. He was then released in 2011 as part of a
Como lo ha
swap
dicho
deal.
muchas veces,
More than 1,000 prisoners,
el pueblo de
Palestinian prisoners,
Israel,
released for one
esta guerra no
Israeli
es contra
soldier who was being
Palestina,
held hostage, Gilad
esta guerra es
Shalit.
contra Hamas.
Sinwar is believed to be the architect, the mastermind behind the October 7th attacks,
El
and
pueblo
is
palestino,
Israel's most wanted.
algún
Let's
grupo debe
speak
estar
now
a
to
favor de
Samuel
Hamas,
Omani, Associate Fellow from
no lo
the
niego,
Royal United Services Institute. Samuel, it's
pero
great to
también hay
have
que
you
saber
this afternoon to get your
que hay una
expertise on this sort of thing. I mean,
mayoría
first of all, just your
silenciosa
reaction to what we know so far.
a la cual
That
le han
statement from the
privado de
IDF
las
ISA
ayudas
saying they are
internacionales
investigating
porque no han
whether or not
tenido dinero
Sinwar
para
has been killed.
comprarlas,
Yeah, we
las que
obviously
han
don't
sido
know that Sinwar has
forzadas
been killed. It's
para
this building that
trasladarse
was
porque
targeted,
ellos no se
and the
quisieron
idea of
rendir en
claiming that
ningún
there were 3
momento
terrorists who
y
were
no han querido
eliminated in their
soltar a los
operations in
rehenes,
Gaza. But they also said that the
pero
operations
parece
did not
que esta
occur in an area
historia
where hostages were. And there were persistent reports over
fueron
the past
libros,
couple of
estamos
weeks,
leyendo las
including
últimas
from the
páginas.
Qatari mediators who have been in touch with Sinwar,
Estamos
that Sinwar was
completamente en
hiding
directo
amongst
desde el
hostages.
17 de octubre
So
del
there's
año
some doubt about
2004
that, but there are photos of
y
Sinwar's
estamos
alleged
tratando
dead
de
body
recopilar la
and
mayor
other
cantidad de
reports that show it
información
could have happened,
posible
but we can't confirm it yet.
para
And
llevarle
at
los
this
detalles
point, as
de
we
la
are
muerte de
awaiting
Yahya Sinwar.
confirmation, just give us a sense, Samuel, of what a change this could bring to the fighting in Gaza if it is confirmed that Sinwar is killed. From the Israeli point of view, is that a war aim achieved?
Well, it's a massive
Las
step
reacciones de la prensa internacional están haciendo eco cada vez más. Los detalles que estamos recibiendo caen en gotera. Pero quiero repetir que no tenemos información alguna con respecto a posibles rehenes. Eso no significa de que no los haya. Pero en estos momentos solamente puedo confirmar
just a short while ago, is it an organization that's like a Hydra?
que esta información solamente se basa
I mean, bearing in mind, of course, that Sinwar and Hania and
en los
have been
restos
leaders
encontrados
for years, for
de 3
decades. They have built
terroristas,
up that power
pero que
base
uno de ellos
within the organization.
es
Where does it go next?
del líder
Well, I mean, obviously,
del grupo
the
islamista
Hamas leadership
palestino
has
Hamas,
suffered blows before,
Yahya
and they've recovered from them.
Sinwar.
I mean, the most notable one was obviously Sheikh Yassin, who was the
Como les dije, sin duda alguna, esto va a dar la vuelta al mundo.
was assassinated in
Esto va a
2004.
traer
You also saw the death of Abdel Aziz al-Raisi also in 2004.
repercusiones
So two major leaders
en la
died
guerra.
around the same time, and Hamas being able to rebuild itself.
Estas
So it's possible if they
repercusiones
could do
pueden
that once,
ser
they could do it
de
again.
forma.
And Sinwar Deep
Algunas
and
de ellas
Hania's
pueden
loss
incluso
will be
crear
rebuilt as an
un
organization.
conflicto
And it's
dentro de
also important to
Gaza
keep in mind that Hamas is not the
entre
only
medio de
kind
los
of
mismos
organization
gazatíes.
sharing the same kind of ideology against Israel.
No lo
There's
sabemos,
also other groups like Islamic
pero
Jihad,
es muy
which
probable
might
que
be
eso
able
pase.
to capitalize and gain momentum that with all this disruption happening in Hamas. So the movement that is creating Hamas is certainly not going to die. And
de
Hamas itself will
organización
probably
de este
continue to
grupo
survive.
Well, it takes me on to my next question, then,
terrorista
doesn't it? If Hamas has been degraded and
está llegando a
broken
su
down
fin.
in some ways as an organization, who
Podrán
then
existir
steps into
futuras
whatever
células.
vacuum there is in Gaza? I know that
Podrán
we're talking
existir
with Ali there is some hope,
como
expectation there could be
movimiento
some who
político.
would come in and help rebuild Gaza after this, but I guess
Pero
what
creemos
you're
que
suggesting
lo
is
que
that
está
Hamas as the
organizando en estos
organization and as the
momentos
idea as well
Israel
will not
para controlar
be killed by the death of the leadership.
a este grupo terrorista
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that we need to
está dando
see what
resultados.
happens from here. Obviously, Hamas is narrowed to parts of southern Gaza. In August and September, the Israelis were fairly confident that they were even in the 11% safe
Están
zone
viendo
surrounding.
América
They're
21 en el
breaking
canal El
down the
Monedero
large
Lleno,
Hamas
que lo estamos
brigades,
llevando en este
smaller
momento en TikTok.
units, and that they
La
killed large
noticia de
number of
Último
Hamas's
Minuto.
rank and file. So
Las
the
IDF
Israelis will see this as another step towards victory in Gaza, which might
habrían
lead them to
eliminado
consolidate and redirect their efforts over to
al
Lebanon.
líder de
But what
Hamas.
comes next is an open question. Is it Israel placing the territory under
Acá hay una
conservatorship for some time?
organización que se
Is it the
está
Israelis passing the authority on to the
deshojando
Palestinian Authority and getting other Arab countries involved in rebuilding, like
y que
Saudi
se
Arabia?
está
I mean, those are probably the most likely options.
derribando
But Hamas and PIJ
sin
and other
ningún
groups will remain threats to
futuro
Israel and
alguno.
insurgents. And
No
the
sabemos
idea is
qué
that
puede
the
llegar a
file will
pasar
not
con el
die,
tema de
and
la
it could even
guerra,
be energized by cooperation between the
pero yo
Palestinian
creo
Authority and
que este
the Israelis in a
golpe es un
post-war scenario,
golpe
and cooperation
profundo
with the
a
Saudis
la
and the Israelis in a post-war
organización
scenario
de
too.
Hamas.
Well, explain that to us, how Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Hamas could,
Esto va a
in fact,
cambiar
be energized by what's happened here and
la
that
geografía
sort of push,
política
desire by
en el
some
este
parties to
medio.
try and rebuild Gaza.
Well, yes, I mean,
Ya
Hamas was
podemos
obviously
ver
energized in the
que
intifadas in the context of the terror organization.
el
Led by the
Jerusalén
very active
Post
Yasser Arafat, of course, from the
también
PLO,
se está haciendo
with
eco
the
de lo
Egyptian
mismo,
Rabin and sort of
diciendo
accepting Israel.
alta
And we've also
probabilidad
seen
de que
the
Sinwar
Saudi
haya
Israeli
sido
normalization talks
asesinado
being one of
en
the
un
catalysts for the
ataque
4%
en
of the
Gaza.
in the first place. So we have a lot of
Funcionarios de
history
seguridad
of
indican que es
basically any kind
posible,
of engagement by Arab
probable
countries
dice,
with Israel,
probable,
or
que Sinwar haya
by
sido
Palestinian
asesinado
organizations
en
with
un
the
ataque
Israelis
en Gaza.
on peace
Las
or on rebuilding or on anything
IDF
of that nature,
aún no
leading to
confirman oficialmente la
the more
identidad del
extremist
terrorista.
elements who
Pero
do
les debo
know
decir,
companies like Hamas and
la
PIJ.
verdad
So I
sea
think that
dicha,
that
las
kind of
fotos que se
cooperation
están
will
mostrando,
enable them as well.
no cabe la
And
menor duda.
Iran has been sponsoring PIJ quite consistently since 2014. So they're an organization which is quite large. It had 8,000 fighters at the time of the 2014 war. We don't know how many they have right now. But
La
it's still
embajada
not a
dice,
large,
funcionarios
not a
de
unit that can
seguridad
easily
han
disappear.
dicho que las posibilidades
Samuel, do we
del
have any
líder de
insight
Hamas,
into
Yahya
Hamas'
Sinwar, haya sido
popularity among
asesinado en
Palestinians
un
at
ataque en
this point?
Gaza?
I
Son cada
understand
vez más
that in the West
altas
Bank it's sort of
información
gained
los medios
popularity over
israelíes
recent months.
israelíes
And in
del
Gaza
juego.
it's probably very difficult to tell.
La
But what's your
IDF
sense of how it is seen as an
emitió
organization
una
by
declaración
ordinary Palestinians at the
en
moment?
conjunta con
Well, that's a
Chilbert,
great question. I mean, obviously, Hamas has
Isa,
only had one election in 2006. They run a very
que informan este
repressive
posible
authoritarian
asesinato en la
structure inside
mañana
Gaza before
de
the
este día jueves.
October 7th war. So it's really kind of
Informe
hard to
inicial
tell.
durante las
It
operaciones
does
de
appear
la
as if
IDF
the Hamas
en la
leadership
franja
is
de
more
Gaza,
popular than Mahmoud
3
Abbas or the top
terroristas fueron
across the two
eliminados
Palestinian
y la
territories, according to
IDF
some polls
y
that
la
were taken
ISA
in March.
están
One poll at that
verificando
time
la
showed that only
posibilidad
about
de que uno de
7%
los
of Gazans
terroristas fuera
blamed
Yahya
Hamas for
Sinwar.
the humanitarian crisis they
Ya
were
lo
facing,
habíamos
for their
dicho.
food shortages, and for their problems. Hamas was very effective redirecting their energy towards Israel. There was another set
En
of
este
polls that were done in
momento,
June that
la
also
identidad
showed
de los
high levels of
terroristas
popularity
no
from
puede
Hamas.
ser
But
confirmada,
since the late
dijo
summer,
la
early
IDF.
fall, I've been seeing surveys that suggest that
En el
there's actually a bit
edificio
of a dip.
donde los
So
terroristas
I
fueron
think they're more popular than
eliminados,
Mahmoud Abbas
no
across
había
Palestinian
señales
territories.
de
There
la
are a few people who
presencia de
don't blame Hamas
rehenes
and
en
blame
la
Israel
zona.
for all their problems.
Las
But there's also a
fuerzas que
subsection who are
operan
getting
en la
frustrated by
zona
this
continúan
perpetual war,
operando
particularly when
con
it
la
seems as if a
precaución
ceasefire in
necesaria.
exchange for hostage releases
Sinwar
was within reach, and
orquestó
they obstructed
la
that.
masacre del 7 de
Samuel, give us
octubre.
your
Estoy leyendo
insight onto
información
the hostages.
que
As Ali
sale
was saying,
en el
Sinwar was
diario
seen as
Jerusalem
the main
Post.
negotiating point and also a
Sinwar
blockage in trying to
orquestó la
come about
masacre
a
del
hostage
7
deal
de
coming
octubre
about.
que
If he
provocó la
is
muerte
confirmed as
de
dead,
más de
who are
1.200
the
personas,
Israelis and
incluidos
the mediators
israelíes
to
y personas de otras
negotiate with to get
nacionalidades.
those hostages out?
Tomó como rehenes
Well, this
a
really
más de
brings a complication to the
250
mediation
personas,
process. I mean,
las
obviously,
cuales
the Qataris
101
were strongly hopeful
permanecen
that
en
Haniyeh was
Gaza.
going to live and
De
survive
los
and be the person
101
to do it
rehenes,
because he's a political
las
figure who has a history of
FBI
carrying out back-channel
confirmaron que
negotiations with the
48
Israelis on
fueron
aid supplies to get
asesinados
nations on aid supplies,
durante
as well as
su
dealing with the hostage
cautiverio.
issue. His
Se
death was a major
creía
blow, and there was not
ampliamente
much
que Sinwar
optimism, I think,
se ha
from
encontrado
my sources in
oculto
Qatar as well
en
as
los
from my sources
túneles
elsewhere
de
in the region,
Hamas
that
a
Sinwar
lo
was going to
largo de
really
la
be
franja
a
de
big
Gaza.
grand bargain deal maker. There was a lot
Nunca
more concern, I think, that Sinwar was
permaneció
going to
en un
use the
solo lugar
hostages
por
as human
mucho
shields for
tiempo,
himself, or kind of
evitando
create a
las
situation that could be
tecnologías de
adverse for them.
comunicación,
So I don't think
confiando
the Israelis are
en
going to see
mensajeros.
this as a massive obstacle to
Estoy leyendo
diplomacy,
la
in the fact that
información
they
que
didn't see
dice
engaging with
el
Sinwar as something
Jerusalem
that was viable
Post
to begin
en
with.
su página de internet.
But
Sigo.
of course, having nobody to
Escudos
talk to is
humanos.
a very bad scenario
Se
also. So
creía que el líder
even having
terrorista
somebody as
de
bad as
Hamas
Sinwar
estaba
may be a
rodeado
little
por
illustrative of that.
rehenes
And all
restantes
the while, those
como un
hostages,
escudo
of course,
humanitario,
remain in
lo que
captivity.
supuestamente
Now,
evitó
in
que
terms
las
of the war
FDI
aims of
lo
the
atacaran,
Israelis and what they will want to
eliminaran.
do in the coming weeks and
Nuevamente,
months,
las
I mean,
FDI
is it likely that
reiteraron
even if this
en su
person is killed, that the
declaración
fighting
que no
continues?
habían
Because
señales
the
de
central doing is,
rehenes
Samuel, in the
en
sense that
el
many people
lugar del ataque.
will recognize is that
Repito,
the situation in Gaza,
nuevamente,
unless
las
resolved
FDI
and taken back
reiteraron
perhaps to
en su
some of those
declaración
what now
que
seem like
no
dreamy days of
había
two-state
señales
solution is
de
going to be, I think
rehenes
you used the word
en
perpetual war.
el
Is that
lugar
sense, isn't
del
it? I
ataque.
mean, sort of where does this go from here? Is
Y
the only
el
possibility to try
Jerusalem
and bring
Post.
about
Emergieron
complete stopping
informes
to the fighting,
contradictorios
Israeli
sobre
occupation,
si
which of course
Sinwar
will not be accepted
había
by anyone in the
abandonado los
Palestinian occupied
túneles
territories?
durante el curso de la guerra entre Israel y Hamas. Y las FDI obtuvieron imágenes del jefe de Hamas caminando por los túneles en febrero de este año. Me imagino que ustedes habrán visto en los medios de comunicación esas imágenes donde se veía que Sinwar estaba caminando por uno de esos túneles. No se veía su rostro, se veía solamente su silueta a contraluz y lo voy a decir, las orejas de Sinwar son inconfundibles y se podía ver que efectivamente estaba en el túnel. Sigo con la información de Jerusalén Post. Varios líderes de Hamas han sido eliminados por Israel, incluido el jefe político de Hamas, Ismael Haniyeh, quien fue asesinado en Teherán en julio del 2024, y el líder militar de Hamas, Mohammed Deif, fue asesinado en la franja de Gaza en julio. Esta noticia está en completo desarrollo. Otro medio de comunicación que da eco de la alta posibilidad de que Sinwar haya sido asesinado en un ataque en Gaza.
From 2007, shortly after the takeover by Hamas, as well as Hamas's victory in the election. So that Israeli blockade was complicated. Also, there were a lot of human rights abuses that were being carried out by Hamas. There were repeated reports from Amnesty International, for example, about extrajudicial killings against Palestinians involved with collaboration with Israel, allegedly, sometimes on very vague terms. So that was some of the stuff that Sinwar was jailed for many years ago.
Investiga si el líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, fue abatido en un ataque en Gaza. Las Fuerzas de Defensa de Israel, FDI, anunciaron este jueves que está investigando si el líder del grupo terrorista islámico Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, fue abatido en un ataque en la Franja de Gaza, cuyo lugar no especifican,
as you said, Hamas defeated Fatah
en el que dicen haber matado al menos a 3 terroristas de esa organización. Estoy traduciendo en vivo. La Fuerza de Defensa de Israel y el Servicio de Seguridad General están comprobando la posibilidad de que uno de los terroristas eliminados fue Yahya Sinwar. Hasta el momento no podemos confirmar de forma definitiva la identidad de los 3 terroristas fallecidos. Ahora, esta información es antes de la publicación que aparece en la cadena internacional Sky News. Vamos a buscar más información que se la estamos llevando en vivo y en directo para todos ustedes a través de América XXI.
Where the Hamas leadership was basically calling for more drastic solutions to what Israel was doing in the West Bank. And then a few months later was October 7th. So Hamas and Fatah can talk, they can coordinate, they can
información se repite en muchos medios,
but there's also
todos
severe
cautosos.
mistrust and severe legacies of violence and
Aquí,
bloodshed that makes both
creo que también voy
organizations
a tener que
see each other
traducir,
as,
pero
as
creo
fierce
que no
adversaries.
tendré
So I think
problemas.
Fatah will probably be quite happy to see
Israel
Hamas
investiga
out of the way,
si hubo
while Hamas will want to stay relevant enough and
en un
existent enough to
ataque
be
el líder de
thorn in
Hamas,
Fatah's
Yahya
side and
Sinwar.
steer Fatah away from
Ah,
more
mira, me la
pragmatic
están
cooperation
poniendo
with
fácil.
Israel and towards
Dana Carni,
allowing
la
for more
información es de Dana,
to fester in the
que
Palestinian territories.
pertenece a la cadena
And in the West Bank, the
CNN.
Palestinian Authority
Vamos
there,
a ver
of
qué es lo
course,
que
with
dice ella.
leader
Dice,
President Mahmoud Abbas,
durante
may
las
see as weak
operaciones de
and
las FDI en Gaza, 3 terroristas fueron
what will happen
eliminados.
with that
Las
organization at
FDI
this point? Do
y
you
la
think
ISA
if it is
están
confirmed that
comprobando
Sinwar
la
has been
posibilidad
killed?
de que uno de los
Well, I
terroristas
think
fuera Yahya
that the
Sinwar.
West Bank,
En
obviously,
este momento
Abbas has
no
been
se
facing a
puede
lot of
dar más
criticisms for his
información
allegations of corruption that have been
por
lined
estos
with him,
medios,
as well as
pero
the
estamos esperando la
generally
identidad
deteriorating
oficial
security
de los
situation, which
terroristas.
includes many attacks coming from
También
Israeli
información
settlers.
que fue
And
entregada
it was
hace
widely
45
believed before
minutos
October
atrás.
7th, of course, that if
Y
there was going to be a new
vamos a
beginning of
ver,
the Israeli-Palestinian conflict,
pero
it may
esta
well
información
come
más
from the
fresca
West
para
Bank
todos
zone.
ustedes.
And that may have been part of the reason why the Israelis were a bit asleep at the wheel with the threat of a ground invasion.
No, la verdad es que
Gaza,
yo no me
the
meto
Gaza
a
and everything like
X
that, because they
o no
were
me
so
meto
focused on
a
the West
Twitter
Bank
porque
and
la
the settler
verdad
violence that was going on
no
there.
es,
He was kind of
no es
ignoring
un
what
medio
was
que
happening
realmente
inside
yo
Gaza.
pueda
So West
confiar
Bank has become
y
more unstable and more, and Abbas's situation has become more perilous
información
ever since the war in Gaza has
por lo
begun.
menos
And any
extraoficial.
move to
Ya
defeat
no me
Sinwar
gusta
or an
con
Israeli
culos
occupation
ni
of
menos
Gaza
para ustedes.
will only lead to heightened violence
Okay.
between those
Hay
settlers, some of
otra
whom are
información de
supportive
un
or sympathetic to
periódico
extremists like Ben Gvir and
conocido
Smotrich, who the British are
que
thinking about sanctioning,
es
and Palestinians who are living there. So I think that there'll be more violence in the West Bank if this does lead to an Israeli occupation
minuto
in
21
Gaza,
y
and there
dice
isn't
que
a
Israel
tangible movement
habría
towards
matado a
durable
Yahya Sinwar,
reconstruction
el
and
cerebro de
Palestinian
los ataques
self-determination.
del 7 de octubre.
Okay, look, Samuel,
Estamos
Armani,
todos dentro
we
de
do
la
appreciate
misma.
your expertise and
Dice,
time
durante
this
las
afternoon
operaciones de la
from the Royal United
IDF en
Services.
Gaza,
Samuel,
3
it's always good to
terroristas
speak
fueron
with you.
eliminados.
Thank you
Ya lo saben.
for that as we're
La
continuing our
inteligencia
coverage of
israelí
this
estaría
developing story and
comprobando
breaking news that the
la
Israelis are investigating the
posibilidad de
possibility
que
that
uno de
the
los
mastermind of
terroristas
the October
fueron
the 7th
Yahya
attacks, the
Sinwar.
military leader
Las
of
imágenes
Hamas in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, has been killed
indiscutibles.
in an
Ya lo sabemos, porque
operation
estamos
in
viendo
Gaza
una de
in
las
the last
imágenes
few
que
hours.
nos ha
Let's bring in
llegado
Professor Fawaz
y
Gerges, Chair of Contemporary Middle
podríamos,
Eastern Studies at the
yo
London
podría
School of
poner
Economics. Professor
dinero
Gerges, great
en
to
la
have
mesa.
you with us.
Yo
Thanks
creo que lo
so
hicieron.
much. Why don't we
Han
just
hecho otras
start
cosas,
our conversation by talking
no
about
sé si
who
más
Yahya
grandes, pero
Sinwar
más sorprendentes
was?
que no nos extrañaría
Yahya
que
Sinwar is the
el señor
defense
Sinwar
minister
ya no
of
esté
Hamas.
compartiendo
He
oxígeno
is
con
now,
nosotros. El
or
cerebro
was, the de
de
facto
la
political leader
matanza
of
del
Hamas,
7 de octubre, estoy
highly
hablando lo que
charismatic,
dice artículo 14. No es
highly
mi
popular.
información ni es mi
He
lenguaje,
was
solamente lo
the
estoy leyendo.
architect
cerebro de la matanza del 7 de octubre se había ocultado durante meses en la franja de Gaza, tras los pueblos israelíes, en los que los milicianos de Hamas mataron a 1.200 personas y secuestraron a 250. Yahya Sinwar, autor intelectual, pasó a esconderse bajo tierra en el laberinto de túneles de Gaza. Desde el inicio de las operaciones militares israelíes en Gaza, Yahya Sinwar ha sido uno de los objetivos claves del ejército israelí, pero durante más de un año Sinwar había logrado evitar la muerte, cuando el anterior líder de Hamas, Yanilla, fue asesinado en Teherán el 31 de julio del 2024. La organización islamista decidió que fuera Sinwar el nuevo jefe. Entre sus primeras medidas al frente de Hamas está la orden para que aumentaran los atentados en Israel. Quiero repetir esto.
The fighting force of Hamas seems to have been severely degraded, and then if it's confirmed that Sinwar has been killed, that's another top leader military that kills, worse than political leader. Dave, who was killed as well not long ago.
Primeras medidas al frente de Hamas
functioning.
Está la orden para que aumentaran los atentados en Israel. ¿Por qué es tan importante esa parte? Porque está reflejando el motivos operandi de las ideas. Está reflejando, está diciendo que el motivo de la persecución de Sinwar era prioritario. ¿Para qué? Para seguir evitando esta guerra, para seguir cuidando al pueblo israelí. Dice artículo 14, escondido junto a los rehenes, la inteligencia estadounidense llegó a asegurar que Sinwar se refugiaba en los túneles, tomaba las decisiones de Hamas, dice, parecía cerca de algunos de los rehenes que quedan cautivos. Se estima que unos 67 secuestrados continúan con vida. Eso es lo que queremos saber. No podría
keep in mind that Israel has been assassinating iconic Palestinian figures for 40, 50 years. Yet, Hamas has been able to rebuild its ranks and file. I take it for now, in the short
Durante meses que creyó Sinwar, de 61 años, y nacido en el campo de refugiados de Khan Yunis, se escondía en su ciudad natal, al sur de la franja de Gaza, tras abatir el líder de Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, en Beirut, el pasado 27 de septiembre. En Israel redoblaron los esfuerzos para eliminar a Sinwar, considerado el cerebro de los atentados del 7 de octubre, el ataque más mortífero desde la creación del Estado de Israel. Señoras y señores, creo que las IDF lo hicieron de nuevo.
Israel's military occupation of
Ya
Palestinian
vienen
lands without granting
una verdadera
Palestinians self-determination. And I'm not saying so,
una verdadera
saga
de operaciones dentro y fuera del país.
International community says so.
Obviamente que tenemos que incluir al Mossad. No solamente los Viper, que no fueron solamente los walkie-talkie, no fueron solamente los paneles solares, que han metido al corazón de países que nunca se esperó que podrían llegar a ser alcanzados por el brazo de Israel. Hoy día no solamente se han metido en la cocina de todos esos países que le estarían dando muerte a Yahya Sinwar. Es un golpe a la mesa y es patear el carro
this could
para
really embolden
poner
Benjamin
fin
Netanyahu and
a
expand
esta guerra.
his war much further, not just to
Creo que lo
Lebanon,
más
but also
sensato
to Iran. This
que
is where
podría
the
ser
risk of further monstrous
esta
miscalculation on the
agrupación,
part of the
la parte
Netanyahu-led
terrorista,
coalition.
es rendirse
Mr. Go, let me just
y
interrogate
entregar a
that. So
esos
you think
rehenes,
that if it
parar
is
con el
confirmed that
sufrimiento,
Sinwar is
parar con el
killed and that
sufrimiento
is
del
the
pueblo
military
de
leader of
Gaza
Hamas
también.
dead in Gaza, that would not,
Es
you
tiempo de
think,
parar
that could
esto
not be
y
the end
empezar
possibly
a
of the
reconstruir
ongoing
una nueva
conflict? That
Gaza.
could be the moment of further
Pero antes
expansion. Are
de
you
todo eso,
suggesting that there
ellos
may well
tienen que
be
entregar
further occupation
a esos
of Gaza
rehenes
by the Israelis as a
y
result of
tienen que
the
entregar
destruction of
las
Hamas?
armas?
Well, I don't
Estamos
say so.
viviendo en un
Listen
planeta
to what the
que si
Benjamin
se conecta
Netanyahu-led government
el
says. They will
conflicto que hay entre
they will never,
Ucrania con
ever
Rusia al
basically
conflicto
exit
que
Gaza.
tenemos en estos momentos en el
Benjamin
Medio
Netanyahu
Oriente,
and his coalition
ya no les
and
quiero
the
decir
military
qué es lo
have
que se
made
puede
it very
provocar en
clear
el
they
coste.
will have
De eso estamos
a
hablando.
security zone
Eso es lo que hay que
between.
evitar.
I mean, Gaza has
Pero
shrunk,
ya
as
vamos
you
a
know,
tener
and the
tiempo
Israelis
para
will never
analizar
leave the
toda
Philadelphia
esa
border between Israel
información.
and Palestine and Egypt. The
Vamos a ver
reality
el
is
diario
Israel
La
wants a free
Vanguardia.
hand, security hand in Gaza. And the
Israel
killing of
cree haber
Sinwar, my
asesinado a
argument
Yahya
is that
Sinwar,
the
líder de
killing of the
Hamas,
Sinwar, the assassination of Sinwar, if it's
tal
confirmed,
como
this
apuntan
will
las
basically
autoridades
really
israelíes.
give Netanyahu more ideological ammunition to
No
convince the
había
Israeli public,
señales
look,
de que
he
hubiera
is
rehenes
winning,
en el
as he keeps saying.
edificio
And that
objetivo
means that
del ataque
leave me
del
finish this
IDF,
war, leave me
donde
have total
murieron
victory over
los
Hezbollah
3
in Lebanon, and
militantes.
let me go,
Ok,
against the
o
head of the
sea,
snake.
acá hay
He
una
calls
información que no
Iran the head of
teníamos.
the axis of
Esto
evil,
no
the
fue bajo
axis of
tierra.
resistance.
Esto
So my
fue,
take on it, not only we're not going to
según La
witness the
Vanguardia,
end of the
aportando,
catastrophe,
dado que no lo
humanitarian
habíamos
catastrophe
leído,
in
o no lo
Gaza,
habíamos
I think we
visto,
might really see
esto
further
fue en un
escalation on the
edificio.
part of Netanyahu
Pero
and
sí
his extremist
sabíamos
religious
que no habían
Zionist
rehenes.
coalition in the next few hours, the next few days. For sure, I hope I am wrong.
El ejército israelí dijo el jueves que estaba estudiando la posibilidad de que haya matado al líder de Hamas. Las indicaciones y las pruebas van a ser entregadas oficialmente muy pronto. La muerte de Sinwar tras su operación en la franja de Gaza que según señalan las autoridades tuvo como objetivo a 3 militantes de Hamas.
Is the removal,
Fuerzas de
could the
Defensa
removal
de
of Yahya
Israel
Sinwar be
y la
good for
Agencia de
that, if
Seguridad
that were
Nacional
to be
están
the moment that brings about
comprobando
some kind
la
of settlement,
posibilidad
some kind of
de que
peace?
uno de los
Well, I mean, you're
terroristas
asking really
eliminados
multiple
fue
questions. Will
Yahya
the Gulf
Sinwar.
states or
Déjenme
most of the
explicar
Arab
esto.
governments be happy?
¿Qué es lo que
Yes.
pasa?
They don't
Que
really
esto
care
yo
for Hamas.
no
They
sé
don't really care for the
tanto
Sinwar.
de
They
guerra,
blame
porque
the Sinwar,
obviamente
in
nosotros
particular
somos un
some Gulf
canal
leaders.
de
But if you
noticias,
ask me
pero
about the
también nos
people,
enfocamos a
there's a
la
big difference
economía.
between the
Yo
rulers
esto lo
and the
estudié,
people. The people will grieve.
aparte,
Sinwar was
pero
very
también lo
popular.
aprendí
He resonated
de
because of his standing
un
out,
amigo que yo
his
tengo que tiene un
defiance,
canal
his offensive
que se
strategy
llama
against Israel.
Estrategias
I mean, there is an
Militares.
argument to be made that
Y
Netanyahu
él,
now
en
could
su
go
canal,
back to the Israeli public and
que
say,
me
we have
enseñó
won.
mucho,
We could
y
really
lo
now
sigo
accept
viendo,
a hostage
él
deal. The
explicó
question is,
que los
will
cuerpos
Hamas
se
accept
llevaban
a hostage deal
y se
without the end of the war? This
analizaban
is the question.
científicamente
Netanyahu wants a pause,
antes
a
de
temporary pause,
confirmar
while Hamas wants the end of
oficialmente
the war itself, period.
la
But the
identidad
Gulf states and the
de
Arab
la
states
persona.
probably will likely be happy that
Imagínense, es
Sinwar
como
has been killed.
los
But the
médicos
people
forenses
in the region, whether the
cuando
Palestinians or
agarran
Jordanians or Iraqis or Lebanese or
a la
Moroccan, I think
persona
many
y
will grieve
necesitan
in
hacerle
as much, well,
el,
much
la
more than they
identificación.
grieved for
¿Ya? O sea,
Hassan Nasrallah,
de
the
eso
killing of
estamos
Hassan
hablando.
Nasrallah, the
Estamos
leader
en
of
esa
Hezbollah.
etapa, estamos en la
And that
etapa
is because, as
de
you said, that
oficialmente
Yahya
reconocer
Sinwar was popular,
que
charismatic, and
Yahya
showed
Sinwar
a
es
level
Yahya
of willingness
Sinwar.
to do what
Ahora,
many had thought unthinkable and
otra
attack
cosa que
Israel
les
in the
tengo que
bloody,
agregar
deadly way that he
es que el
chose to
señor
do
Sinwar,
on the 7th of October.
su
Absolutely.
ficha
I mean,
médica,
remember historically,
también
in the
está
past, 50
en
years,
Israel.
Israel
Ahora,
is
¿por qué lo
always
sé?
on the offensive.
Porque el
Always.
señor Sinwar fue
Israel always
operado
attacks, subjugate, dominate,
en Israel
kills,
muchos
mow the
años
grass. The
atrás.
strategy is to mow the grass. This is
Sinwar
really the
estuvo
first time ever
en
in
quirófano
Palestine history
en
where
Israel,
Palestinian leaders stood
que a
up
él le
and went
salvaron la
on the
vida.
offensive against one of the most
Miren lo
powerful
que son las
nations
cosas.
militarily in the Middle East and the
Israel
world,
le
armed
salvó
to
la
the
vida a
teeth by the United
Sinwar.
States. So in a
Sinwar,
way, Yahya
después
Sinwar really resonates
de haber
deeply
sido
in the Palestinian and the Arab
liberado y
imagination
enviado
as a
a
leader
su
who
país
dared
siguió desarrollando actos guerrilleros terroristas, terminó con lo que pasó el año pasado en Israel. Pero bueno, esos son cosas que vamos a tener que seguir tratando más adelante. Sigo con el texto de La Vanguardia. El anuncio se produce poco después de que el ejército anunciara haber bombardeado una escuela en el campamento de refugiados de Jabalía, en el norte. Jabalía.
But how does that
Voy a
sit with his
repetir eso,
bloody
muy
past? You know,
importante
this is a man
también.
who was an
El
enforcer,
anuncio
was
se produce
jailed for
poco
killing not
después
only
de
Israelis
que
but
se
Palestinians
anunciara
as well, who were
haber
thought to be
bombardeado una
collaborating with
escuela.
the Israelis. A
Hay
violent man who,
muchas
as I
cosas
say,
que se están
masterminded
diciendo que son muy
that attack on
importantes.
Israel on the 7th
Y yo
of
también
October.
caía,
Despite
pero
all of
cómo
that,
esta
he,
gente
if it
bombardeó
is
una
confirmed that he
escuela.
has been killed,
Pero
you
es que en esa
think that he
escuela
will be viewed as a martyr
han
and perhaps
encontrado
as a
armamento.
hero by
En esa escuela
many
se han escondido
Palestinians and in
terroristas.
the wider diaspora.
En esa escuela la han usado para pantalla, para muchas cosas que ahora, y solo ahora se están descubriendo. Esta escuela había sido supuestamente usada como centro de mando control. En un ataque en el que ya han muerto al menos 28 personas y otras 150 han resultado heridas, según oficia los medios de gobierno de Hamas. Esta es la importancia que estamos hablando delante, de darle término a esto lo antes posible. La gente de Gaza tiene que colaborar y tratar dentro de lo posible de colaborar en esta causa, de terminar esta guerra lo antes posible, neutralizar jamás y que tenga un mejor futuro. Sinwar, quien pasó 22 años en una cárcel israelí hasta su liberación el año 2011 durante el intercambio de más de 1.000 presos palestinos
100%.
a cambio de un
continue on that
soldado
because
israelí.
of course Hamas as an organization when first set up wanted the destruction
Sinwar
of
pasó
Israel.
22 años en una cárcel israelí hasta su liberación el año 2011 durante el intercambio de más de 1.000 presos por uno. 1.000 presos por un soldado israelí.
Israel would not exist
Gilad
as the neighbor to the Palestinians.
Shalit, quien estaba retenido en Gaza, ha sido descrito por quienes le interrogaron como una persona extremadamente inteligente. Desde el inicio de la guerra en Gaza, hace más de un año, su paradero ha sido prácticamente desconocido para Israel, quien auguraba que el líder de Hamas estaría en los túneles, cerca de algunos del centenar de rehenes que siguen en el enclave a modo de protección. A mí me encantaría saber más detalles de todo esto. ¿Por qué? Porque me gustaría saber caso si a Sinwar le estaban buscando, le estaban pillando la pesada, o esto fue casi un rebote de bola de millardos de que se bombardean puntos que se saben donde hay grupos terroristas. Lo que pasa es que la iglesia no da puntada sin hilo, no da puntada sin hilo. Ojalá sea él, ojalá sea cierto, hola amigo, shalom,
Professor, you've given us the
muchas gracias a toda la gente que está dejando su mensaje en el chat. Estamos completamente en vivo y en directo. Estamos a 17 de octubre. Estoy transmitiendo desde Londres, Inglaterra. Son las 15 horas con 10 minutos y vengo a traerles esta noticia impactante en la que se dice
possibility of Yahya Sinwar being killed continues to be out there. Is this now an opportunity for those that want to see that two-state solution, the two-state solution, the only thing that can bring peace to the region? Is it an opportunity for diplomacy and work to try and bring that about at this point?
Well, I mean, the question is, Israel does not listen to anyone except one audience, and that's the United States of America. You know, and I know that Israel does not really listen to the UK or to France or to the United Nations. And that's why without American leadership using leverage against Israel, nothing will happen. And so far, we have really seen that the American leadership, it doesn't matter whether it's Barack Obama or whether it's Donald Trump or whether it's Biden. They're unwilling or unable to use leverage in order to really convince not Russia, Israel to accept a Palestinian state. So the question is we're back to square one. How do we convince an Israeli government that does not believe, does not want, object, reject a Palestinian state without American leadership, without American leverage? And I'm afraid to say, regardless of who wins the election in November in the United States, I don't think we're going to see a different kind of radical American strategy that basically pressures Israel in order to end its military occupation. And that's why I'm sad to say that with a sad heart, I don't see a light at the end of the tunnel in the next 5 or 10 years.
It's an intractable situation, isn't it, Professor? Look, you'll know that this Netanyahu government, it wasn't very popular prior to the war breaking out. It's gained some popularity, amazingly, as the war has been ongoing for this past 12 months. But you'll know that many people in Israel just want this all to be over, want to live in peace in the region, want those hostages returned. What about internal pressure, do you think, from that side of politics within Israel that could, if this is confirmed, Sinwar is dead and Prime Minister Netanyahu announces that and says that the war there in that respect is over, could that pressure tell in any way?
Actually, the reverse happen. You're going to see Netanyahu's popularity skyrocketing in the next few days. Because Netanyahu now is going to go back to the Israeli public and said, I promise you total victory. That's killing the Hamas leader who masterminded the 7th of October attack. This is exactly what we're going to see. And the polls of Israel, as you said, suggest that Netanyahu has gained popularity. In any new election, Netanyahu and his extremist Zionist religious coalition will gain probably a majority. And that's why, at the end of the day, internal pressure is very well, but the majority of the Israeli public support the extremist elements. The Israeli public has really shifted more and more to the right. Even the center has shifted to the right. That's why Benjamin Netanyahu is seen as a centrist conservative. I mean, imagine Benjamin Netanyahu as a centrist. So on his far right, you have really extremist Zionist coalition who do not really believe in peace. They want to, in fact, they want to nationalize, they want to occupy, they want, including Gaza and the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Again, internal pressure is important, but I would argue that American and British pressure, consistent, real, important, real pressure on Israel in order to end its military occupation. I don't see our government here in the UK, I don't see even my own government in the United States really exerting real leverage in order to bring about a two-state solution or even the end of the Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands.
Talk to us about that kind of pressure, that kind of leverage. You'll know that an ultimatum was put in just a few days ago onto the Israelis that if aid was not getting into Gaza, some military aid would be stopped coming from the United States. Is that the only kind of pressure that would possibly tell on the Israelis to completely stop providing military aid? But how, from the US administration, would they even be able to begin to do that, considering the threats that Israel is under from some of its neighbors?
No, the Americans will never stop providing Israel with arms. They have made it very clear. I mean, imagine it's been 12 months. And think of how many times the Americans and the British have asked the Israelis to minimize the civilian casualties. How many times has the Biden administration told the Israelis to allow humanitarian aid to basically enter Gaza? And Israel has found ways and means to manipulate and get away with it. As we talk, you and I, we're talking about Sinwar,
Vamos a ver lo que dice el diario El Clarín. El ejército israelí dice que está comprobando la posibilidad de haber matado al líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. También muestra la misma
keep asking and keep demanding, but at the end of the day, you need to stop the flow of arms. As the French president has made it very clear, once you stop the flow of arms, I think Israel will listen. Because America basically
comprobando la posibilidad de haber matado al líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. Sinwar ha liderado Hamas dentro de Gaza desde el año 2017 y se unió a las filas a principios de la década.
To be armed in order to defend itself.
I mean, you say they believe that. Does Israel need to be armed to defend itself from its neighbors?
Well, look, Israel is not defending itself. I'm sorry to say that. You might be surprised.
Professor Gage, sorry, but I mean, those in Iran do not want to see the state of Israel dead.
Well, no, not really. I mean, the Jordanian foreign minister, as you remember, in the United Nations just 10 days ago, he said Israel keeps saying that
de que hayan muerto a una persona sin saber que esa persona es la que está muerta.
This is, Ayman Safar, and his comments were reported very wide. Netanyahu keeps talking about war and winning, and Ayman Zawahiri was speaking in the name of 57 Arab and Muslim states. He's saying we have proposals on the table for Israel. Let's find a resolution. But at the end of the day, look, Netanyahu and his coalition do not really believe in genuine reconciliation with the Palestinians. They don't believe in a Palestinian state. Because if they want to make peace, they have to end their occupation. So, again, without American pressure, without American use of leverage, you and I can talk about it academically in the media for hours. You need American leverage in order for Israel to basically accept the reality of ending its military occupation.
Un bolso que podríamos decir con maletín de un lado, una cosa así. Obviamente que no se ve adelante de un joven que es el hermano, el que fue a encaminarlo para llevarlo a nuevos escondites o a
information coming from police in Argentina and Buenos Aires their investigation into the death of the One Direction star Liam Payne.
Entonces después dice, ¿quién es Yahya Sinwar? En Gaza lo llaman el puro.
Remember that he died having fallen from a third floor balcony at a hotel in Buenos Aires. Police found medicine as well as alcohol. The medicine they found was
el jefe de Hamas, el portavoz militar de Israel,
the room the police say was
complete proclamó un hombre muerto.
Complete disarray. You will remember there was the emergency call that was given
by hotel staff
to the emergency services before Liam Payne's death, where the hotel manager had talked about the room being broken up.
Está considerado el estratega que ha dirigido los ataques de Israel a Israel, las preparaciones con 5.000 cohetes, la infiltración más allá de las fronteras, el ataque a la radio de música que convocó a miles de jóvenes el 7 de octubre del año.
Aftermath of the death of the One
No se mató a
Payne. I want to return to our coverage now of the Middle East. To that news that the Israelis are investigating whether or not Yahya Sinwar has been killed in an operation in which 3 people have died.
Perdónenme, pero este es mi humilde punto de vista.
His family in the tunnel network beneath Gaza when Hamas launched the attack.
Este golpe es más importante que el golpe a los Viper.
The IDF released this video footage back on the 13th of February. They claim it showed that Sinwar was in the tunnels moving through them with his family.
De la guerra,
identify him there with the red ring around his body as well as by
si Israel lo sabe manejar, como no me cabe la menor duda,
claim to have found millions of dollars in a safe that belonged to him. Now they are continuing to investigate whether or not the military leader of Hamas has been killed in
la
an
situación en
Israeli
Gaza
operation
dentro de
in
las
the last
próximas
few
semanas.
hours. We're going to have the very latest on that story.
No digo que esté controlado. No digo que esté controlado, pero lo que sí digo es que no me cabe la menor duda
You're watching Sky News Today and
que ellos se la van a pensar.
On the possibility
Sabemos
of the
que
military
si
leader
muere
of
uno,
Hamas, Yahya Sinwar,
asume otro. Eso lo tenemos claro.
Leader of Hamas
Sabemos
huge
que
repercussions. It is reported
se
that he may have
reproducen
been killed in an Israeli
de
operation
una
in
forma
Gaza. Now,
increíble.
in a statement posted onto
Pero también
social media,
sabemos
the IDF said during IDF operations,
el
3
calado
terrorists were eliminated.
que
The
significa
IDF and ISA are checking the
eliminar
possibility
a
one
Yahya
of the
Sinwar.
terrorists was Yahya Sinwar.
Porque esto no es un calado solamente
Cannot be confirmed. In the building where the
que mataron
terrorists
al
were
jefe
eliminated, there were no signs of the
de
presence
Hamas.
of hostages in the area.
Esto va un
The
poquito más
forces
allá.
operating in the area are
No es el
continuing
hecho
to
de que
operate
hayan matado al
with
número
the
uno.
required caution.
No.
Well, earlier
Esto va
today,
un
an
poquito más allá.
Israeli airstrike on a school in the north of Gaza,
Esto es un
Jabalia
golpe
refugee camp, killed at
psicológico
least 15 people. That is
a las
according
tropas.
to the health ministry.
Esto es un golpe
The Israeli military says that
psicológico
the strike targeted dozens of Hamas and Islamic Jihad
a la
militants.
gente de
They
Hamas
say it had gathered at the school.
porque Sinwar
Israelis released the
no
names of
es
12 people
un
they say were
líder
militants who were
cualquiera.
there. It's not
Sinwar
yet known
no era
whether this attack
un
on Jabalia is the same
simple
one in which Sinwar
líder
may have been
o el
killed.
número uno del
And the
tema.
61-year-old has
Sinwar
led Hamas since
era
2017. He joined
un tipo
the ranks of the group in the early
muy querido por
1980s.
las tropas de
Spent
Hamas,
more than 20 years
muy
in
popular,
Israeli prison for killing both Israelis and
muy
Palestinians.
respetado.
Palestinians that were
Y
suspected
ustedes
of
tienen que
collaborating
tener en
with Israel.
consideración que
Well,
cuando
Sinwar was
hay una
released in
organización,
2011 as
cualquiera
part of a
sea
swap deal
esta,
from all the Palestinian prisoners for one Israeli
se
soldier,
pueden
Gilad
matar a un
Shalit,
jefe,
who'd been held hostage by Hamas for
pero
more
matar a un
than
jefe
5
o matar
years.
al número uno
Sinwar survived
no
an assassination
significa
attempt
matar
in
al líder.
2021 after an Israeli airstrike
Bajo mi
was reported to have
humilde
hit
punto de
his home.
vista, aquí
He is thought to be the
eliminaron
architect of the 7th of October attacks, which killed
al líder principal
1,200
de
people.
fue
Sinwar
quien
was at the top of Israel's most
van a
wanted
llegar los
list.
entendidos en la materia,
Following the
van a llegar
assassination of
los
Ismail
estrategas de
Haniyeh,
distintos,
the political leader of Hamas in July,
de distintos
Sinwar
canales que yo no me
succeeded
pierdo
him,
ninguno.
replaced him as the head of the
Eh,
political bureau, and
Y
took
van a analizar
control
el tema en
of
profundidad.
the
Pero yo
entire
creo que este
group.
golpe es un
Right, let's
golpe
take you now to our
importantísimo
Middle East correspondent
a la
Ali
organización
is standing
de
by.
Hamas.
So Ali, have we got any more information as to this investigation
Déjame
as
ver
the Israelis
si
look as to
más
whether or not
información.
Yahya Sinwar has been killed?
Gracias.
I think it's looking increasingly likely that he has been killed. I wouldn't quite go as far as to say that it is certain yet.
Muchas gracias por
But
seguir.
sources I've been speaking to in the Israeli government and the Israeli military,
Sí,
I'd say,
nosotros
very high
somos
up sources,
América XXI,
are
estamos
sounding very
transmitiendo en
confident
vivo y en directo
that
hoy
Sinwar has
17
been
de
killed.
octubre
It's the
del año
process of identification that is taking place
2024
now. So we
y
know that the Israelis
estamos
have his
informando
fingerprints and his DNA
de
from the time that he spent in Israeli
informativo.
prisons. We
Están
understand his body is
llevando
back or is in
cadenas
Israel now,
de
so he's
televisión
undergoing those
nacional e
tests. I
internacional
suspect we will
están
get
dando
confirmation one way or the other, but
la gran
confirmation that he
noticia
has been killed
de que
very shortly
habrían
indeed.
eliminado a Yahya
It
Sinwar,
really, I think the Israeli military and the Israeli government
el jefe,
are
el número
certain,
uno,
just
el
beyond
líder
that
de la
absolute
organización
scientific proof,
islamista palestina
from the various forensic
Hamas.
tests that need to be done on his body, that they have got
En
their
estos
most wanted
momentos
man,
se están
someone who
haciendo
they have been trying to
las
kill for a long
pruebas
time, someone who evaded
biológicas
capture
para saber
throughout the last 12 and a bit months of war, despite the fact
confirmar
that many of his senior
100%
commanders around him were
esta
taken out one by the Israeli
información.
military. Sinwar, we know, was at times
Quiero
hiding
decir
in the
también
tunnels below
que no
Gaza.
hay
We showed that
información
CCTV that the Israeli
alguna,
military released back in
no estoy
February of him
ocultando
going
nada,
down the
yo
tunnel
no
with some
estoy
members of his family.
escondiendo
The
nada
Israeli military have said
de los
before that they
rehenes.
believe they got very
No
close
hay
to him on a
información
number of
ninguna
occasions.
al
I
respecto
think on one stage,
y
perhaps
ese
a
es
slight
un tema
exaggeration, but one Israeli general saying they got to
creo
tunnel where
que
his coffee was still warm, but he managed to escape the Israeli military
no
time
se
and
está
time again. And
nombrando
if
ni
it
se está
turns out to be
mencionando
true
en
that
ningún
he
medio
was
de
killed and he was killed above ground
comunicación
in perhaps a gunfight, then I think that would be a surprising turn of events,
hay otro
because
medio
the working assumption
que se hace
was that
eco,
he was deep underground
el
and
Infobae.
very possibly had
Infobae
surrounded
dice
himself with
Israel
some of the remaining living
analiza si
hostages in order
Yahya
to give
Sinwar,
himself
el
a
líder
degree
de
of
Hamas,
protection. But
es uno de
according
los
to the Israeli military
terroristas
statement,
abatidos durante
no
un
hostages
operativo
and no signs
en la
of any of the
franja
hostages were
de
found
Gaza.
near
El
the
máximo
body of
jefe
the
de
three
la milicia,
men. We don't know,
respaldada
have no
por
hint
Irán,
as to who, or the
considerado el
identification of the other
cerebro
two.
detrás
But it
del
does
ataque
look, as I
el
say,
7 de
increasingly
octubre, ha
likely
sido uno de
that
los
Yahya Sinwar,
objetivos
the leader of
principales
Hamas, the
de las
mastermind and the
fuerzas
author of some of the
de
attacks, has
defensa
been killed.
desde entonces.
Thank you for that.
La información la ha citado hace solamente 3 minutos y agrega: las fuerzas de defensa de Israel, las FBI y el Servicio de Seguridad General israelí anunciaron hoy la eliminación de 3 terroristas durante operaciones en la franja de Gaza. Están investigando la posibilidad que uno de ellos fuera Yahya Sinwar, el máximo líder de Hamas, en el enclave, según el comunicado conjunto de las FBI y el ISA durante las operaciones de las FBI de la franja de Gaza. 3 terroristas fueron eliminados. Las FBI y las ISA están verificando la posibilidad que uno de los terroristas fuera Yahya Sinwar. Sin embargo, las autoridades israelíes advirtieron que en esta etapa no pueden confirmar la identidad de los terroristas abatidos. El comunicado también señaló que en el edificio donde se llevó a cabo la operación no había señales de la presencia de rehenes en el área. Importante. Las fuerzas israelíes que operan en la zona continúan sus actividades con la precaución requerida según el comunicado oficial. Esa precaución debe estar ligada a la posibilidad de que pudieran haber rehenes. Hay que ser cauteloso. El comunicado dice: este desarrollo se produce en medio de la continua operación militar de Israel Gaza, que comenzó tras el ataque de Hamas el 7 de octubre del año 2023. Yahya Sinwar, considerado el cerebro detrás de ese ataque, ha sido uno de los objetivos principales de las fuerzas israelíes desde entonces. El anuncio se produce poco después de que el ejército anunciara haber bombardeado una escuela en el campamento de refugiados en el norte de Israel, supuestamente usada como centro de mando y de control.
In Gaza is demonstrative. It's about showing the rest of the region the power that the Israelis have if you decide to attack them. Some of what we have seen here in Lebanon as well also
como les digo, me están pidiendo que vaya a X, demuestren que está en X. Yo no me meto a X, y menos para buscar información para ustedes. No es mi estilo. Yo prefiero tener menos gente que me esté viendo en este momento. Mi único objetivo para mí es llevarle la noticia. Y la noticia es la misma noticia que están los medios de comunicación
we have killed their leadership and we have significantly degraded them to such an extent that they can no longer attack us. So you can take that victory. That, of course, still leaves the hostages, though, and it still leaves that burning question of what happens in Gaza after the war has been effectively won as a military campaign. And we don't know the answer to those questions.
Con ellas que eliminarlas, porque obviamente mis niños me pueden pillar mi teléfono.
Let's bring in Joseph, a couple of former head of IDF intelligence and research
Entonces,
fellow at the
vamos
Jerusalem
a
Center
buscar
for
otra
Public Affairs.
información
Joseph
que se
Kapuasa, thanks
pueda
so much
llegar
for
a
making the time to
compartir
speak to us
con
today. We
ustedes.
really do
Quiero
appreciate
agradecerles
it.
la sintonía.
What's your sense of
Somos
where we are
América
now? It's
21,
just been
estamos en el
reported.
canal El Monedero Lleno.
It's said
Estamos
by the
transmitiendo
Khan
en
and
directo
N12
algo
news that
que ya
the cabinet
está
has been told that
dando
it's
la
very likely
vuelta
that
al
Sinwar is
mundo.
dead.
Ha sido anunciado por las principales cadenas de televisión de Europa, de América.
Sinwar is not only the leader of the Palestinian terror group in Gaza, but also the leader of this terror group, Hamas, all over the Middle East. They are located not only in Gaza. And losing their leader is a message to the Palestinians that don't mess around with us.
A mí me pillaron haciendo mis videos
and it seems that we have managed to do that.
de economía.
That is a major blow to Hamas, and I hope
Me
this is going to
salta
be
esto a la
translated
pantalla.
into the end of the war in
Habría que
Gaza, in the
compartir
sense that
con ustedes.
Hamas will have to evacuate Gaza and bring back the
Okay.
hostages to their homes.
Could it be the moment for a full stop and a drawing of the line in the war in Gaza, Mr. Kapuasa?
Okay.
It is the beginning of this process, I think. It's bringing
Eso ya
down
lo leí un poquito más.
and eliminating Hamas. Hamas leader was one of
A
the
ver,
elements that would comprise the victory.
Otro último minuto de el
but
Jerusalem
it's a
Post.
necessary step in order to achieve this goal.
Vamos a ver.
It's not sufficient to make it all happen. We need to see that Hamas
Lo vamos a ver.
gives up being the ruler of Gaza and is ready to give back the hostages. These are two steps that are necessary to happen as well before we can say that the war can be over.
Do you have an insight as well into how
Atraso.
the hostages can now be
Hay
negotiated?
una
They're at least been
actualización
negotiated at this
de
point.
toda esta
Considering the fact that
información,
Sinwar, as we understand it, was the
una
person that was
actualización
conducting
que
the
la
negotiations
trae
and in fact
el
was the block.
Jerusalem
Who do
Post.
the Israelis, who do the mediators get to talk to at this point then, do you think?
I think that there's going to be somebody taking over from Sinwar. There are
Okay.
still some leaders of Hamas
El
there.
Jerusalem
And
Post en
definitely
este
there are some
update
leaders that are still outside of Gaza
solamente
that are
está
in the key
trayendo
positions of Hamas. And
una
what we can offer is that
reseña
for the
biográfica
Hamas operatives that are still in Gaza to leave Gaza,
de
to
Sinwar,
bring back the hostages. We are
cosa
ready
que
in
si
this
la
context to
trajimos
release some
delante,
terrorists from jail
pero se la podríamos
and
leer a la
to
gente que
to allow
se ha
Hamas save
estado
face, but
sumando,
provided that all of the
ya que Sinwar
hostages are brought back in one round.
nació en Jan,
Look, as you
es
mentioned,
el 29 de
this
octubre
is
de
confirmed and he
1962
is killed.
y
That
fue
will be one of the main
el líder de la
as you said,
organización
it will be
islamista
a
de
sign
Hamas,
that
así
those
como
in Hamas
principal
can be got
responsable
by
de la
these ways. But what
matanza
about for the ordinary
de la franja de
Palestinians?
Gaza el año,
What happens next for them, do you
así
think?
como principal
Will there be
responsable de la
a
misma
chance for
en
there
la
to be
franja de
peace in the
Gaza
region for
desde el año
both sides?
2017.
For sure,
Fue uno
yes. I
de
think
los
once Hamas leaves Gaza,
fundadores del,
and once the population
del
in
aparato
Gaza
de
gets
seguridad
the impression
Hamas
that they are never
antes
coming
del
back,
asesinato
there's going to
de
be some leaders
Ismail
from within the
Haniyeh
population in Gaza
en
that would be ready
junio,
to assume
julio del
responsibility
año
for what's happening in the future in Gaza.
2024.
And we can gradually,
Sinwar
we have
fue
to
uno
go
de los
through a
máximos
process of
líderes de Hamas
de-radicalization
y
and
podría
get
haber
rid
muerto
of
en
the
Gaza
Palestinian narrative of
en
destroying
los
Israel and
pasados
the
minutos.
narrative that led to 7th of October. We have to understand the
Sí,
Palestinians
sí.
under the
Lo-
leadership of Sinwar
lo-
carried
el
out the 7th
punto
of
es,
October massacre
el punto
because they
es
believe this is the right thing to do.
que
This
lo
didn't
que se está
meet
mostrando
a
no
crime
en
in
las
their mind.
redes sociales que
In
están
their
en el
mind,
pequeño
in
momento,
their mind, they did the right thing.
lo que se está diciendo, lo que se está
It's
mostrando
okay. We've still
en
got you.
los medios
No,
electrónicos de
thank you.
todo
We
el
can still
mundo,
hear
en
you fine. So
They did
idiomas,
the right thing, and
dan
I think that we
a
have to
conocer
de-radicalize them and to
que
take away from their minds this narrative.
la
The more
IDF
we make progress
dio
in this
muerte a
direction,
Sinwar,
the
en este
greater are
momento
the chances
está
that we shall be able to
haciendo
form some sort of
simplemente
coexistence with the Palestinians.
la prueba
Use the word coexistence, so
biológica.
let's explore that. So does that mean then that there should be a sense that there will be a functional Palestinian state back on the borders of 67 as has been hoped for by many?
Vamos a leerla
I think
de
it's
todas
so
maneras.
early to speak about
Vamos.
the final
El
status
nuevo líder
situation.
de Hamas,
There's
Yahya
still a
Sinwar,
long way
podría
of
haber
de-radicalization
muerto,
that has to be performed.
según
Look,
el
it's not only
ejército de
Hamas.
Israel
We're
en
talking
los
also about
pasados
Palestinian Authority. The Palestinian
minutos.
Authority
Pero
is
yo
committed
creo
to
que
this
ya son
narrative
horas.
of destroying Israel.
que dice, Israel afirma que está investigando que Yahya Sinwar, nuevo líder de Hamas, ha muerto en un ataque de las fuerzas de defensa de Israel en la franja de Gaza. Las fuerzas de defensa de Israel investigan si el nuevo líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, ha muerto en un ataque en la franja de Gaza, según han anunciado en un comunicado. Han informado de que durante una operación del ejército, 3 terroristas fueron eliminados en Gaza. La FBI y el Shabak, que es el servicio de inteligencia están comprobando la posibilidad de que uno de los terroristas fuera Yahya Sinwar. En este momento no se puede confirmar la identidad de los terroristas, reza el comunicado, pero muestra la imagen que está dando la vuelta al mundo, que se las describí.
To speak now about what's going to happen in 20 years, I hope it's going to be possible to see a different approach by the Palestinians that looks for cooperation, just like the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and many other countries in the Arab world are ready to establish normal relations with Israel. Once that is accomplished, everything is possible. But let's not create expectations that cannot be fulfilled too early.
Do you think? For Israel, if it is confirmed that Yahya Sinwar has been killed?
We are in a effort, an ongoing effort to clarify to everybody that the idea of launching a terror attack like the one we saw on October 7th was a big mistake, huge mistake. And one of the ways to do that is by allowing them to understand that they are going to pay a very heavy price for it. And Sinwar's death, if confirmed, is a part of this payment that they are going to pay for.
Hay gente que de repente me está viendo.
It's going to deter them, I hope so, from even thinking about another 7th of October. So far, we haven't managed to do that.
Pero la imagen es clara, podría decir es
October whenever it's possible. I think by eliminating Sinwar, we have a better chance to expect that something else is going to develop on the other side of the world.
Su brazo izquierdo.
Could it not be the case, though, that eliminating Sinwar produces more people who have the same ideology as him?
Y eso es lo que vamos a decir.
Could it not be the case, Yosef Kapawasa, that eliminating Sinwar in this way creates more people with that same ideology?
Porque hay que hacer análisis.
Most of the Palestinians have this ideology anyhow. It's not a problem of having more people.
Durarse un par de horas
y lo más probable es que dentro de las próximas horas las IDF van a confirmar esta noticia que en este momento está dando la vuelta al mundo. Hamas has, as a matter of fact, according to public opinion polls, they
La
have support of something like 75% of the population. So it's
versus la moral del ejército de Israel son las caras de la moneda en este momento. Un ejército israelí dentro de los últimos días ha sufrido nuevos golpes.
And I hope many more will accept that this was a wrong move and try to think of something more positive to do with themselves.
What do you think will be the decision from the cabinet, from Benjamin Netanyahu, if this is confirmed? Where will he want to take this next?
Secuestrados que siguen en manos de esta agrupación, siguen en manos de Hamas, 101 secuestrados desde el 7 de octubre, dejaron de ver sus familias, que sus familias fueran a diario. Los amigos sufren diario. Familias que incluso combate de la guerra de la social media, cuando esta gente que debe tener problemas mentales para hacer este tipo de cosas, porque mandaba un mensaje por Facebook o mandaba un mensaje
Joseph Kapuas, former head of IDF Intelligence,
imágenes
on this happening. Thanks so much for making the time to
mejores
speak to us,
ni
Joseph.
Thank you.
Pero esto
Right, now
es
it is thought
lo
that Yahya
espero
Sinwar
y
had been
esto
living
es lo
with
que
his
yo
family in the tunnel
pido
network beneath Gaza
fervientemente.
when Hamas launched
Ojalá
their
que
attack
esto sea
against Israel on the 7th of
un
October.
punto de
Now,
quiebre
this video was released by the
esta
Israeli
guerra,
military back
que
in
sea
February,
la
claiming
situación,
to show
que
Sinwar and his
sea
family
el
moving
día
through a tunnel.
en que
The
se
IDF
puedan
released more
seguir
footage claiming to
dando
have found
buenas
millions in
noticias.
cash in a safe that had belonged
Yo no
to
tengo
Sinwar.
nada
And on
contra el
this week's
pueblo
The World
palestino.
podcast,
No
star
creo que
world
Israel
presenter
tenga
Yalda Hakim
algo
discussed
contra
with her
el
co-host Richard
pueblo
Engel
palestino.
why Israel had
Y
been
de
unable
hecho,
to reach
el primer
Sinwar up
ministro
until now.
lo dijo desde el primer día.
Security and defense establishment will say to me when I say, why haven't you got Yahya Sinwar's head on a plate right now? They will say, we know where he is, we know what he's doing. We know he's in these tunnels, but he's surrounded himself with our hostages. So we're not about to kill 10, 15 Israeli hostages to get Yahya Sinwar. Now, Hassan Nasrallah did live in hiding. He gave his sermons in hiding. He lived underground for decades because of concern around Israeli assassination, but not to the same extent as Yahya Sinwar. And perhaps he thought on some level this was a red line that the Israelis wouldn't cross.
Pero sí debo de decir que el ánimo del ejército Israel está bien arriba y han logrado un objetivo que se los voy a decir que yo no lo esperaba. No espera noticia, pero entre la escalada de noticias que nos ha traído el Mossad y las IDF durante la última semana, si hay que colocarlas en la pirámide, lo que pasó hoy día yo lo coloco en el número 1. Yo hubiese colocado la del Viper en el número 1, un tema de escalafón, pero esto para mí es un golpe a la mesa que ha desarrollado
this was a very,
está llegando más información
plan for Sinwar, and no question that the elimination of him is an important step in the direction of finishing and completing this war. It will probably take some more time, but this is something that is
repitiendo el tema de la espera,
bringing a solution.
Es entendible. Hay medios de comunicación que están esperando la confirmación oficial, la confirmación de las pruebas biológicas, pero nosotros estamos haciendo eco de lo que están diciendo los distintos medios de comunicación. De hecho, estamos viendo la imagen de la cadena de televisión Sky News, la cual fue la primera cadena de televisión en el mundo que lanzó esta información, y de ahí se fueron sumando el resto de las cadenas que conocemos, que yo he ido informando los pasados minutos.
Through Israeli border. So this is the aim. I think Sinwar was a very focal point within this establishment in Gaza.
Me van a hacer una prueba
in spite of all the others
de mi
already killed during the
portugués.
war, and some very important and
Déjame ver caso
focal commanders and others. He was the leader. He was elected after Hania to be the leader of the what they called the
Yahya Sinwar, líder de Hamas, ha sido eliminado por Israel.
And he was very
El diario Times de Israel ha afirmado que el ejército israelí habría acabado con la vida del líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar. Este deceso habría producido tras un bombardeo realizado el pasado día 16, en el que también murieron otros 2 miembros de la organización. Las fuerzas de defensa de Israel y la Agencia de Seguridad Nacional están comprobando la posibilidad de que uno de los terroristas eliminados fuera Yahya Sinwar. Hasta el momento no podemos confirmar de forma definitiva la identidad de los 3 fallecidos, reza el comunicado castrense. El ejército tampoco ha dado detalles del escenario exacto de esta operación. No obstante, varias de las fotografías difundidas permiten identificar a un individuo con rasgos similares al sucesor de Hanayeh. Espero que no vayamos tan mal con esto. No obstante, el canal 12 de Israel ha afirmado que una fuente militar habría confirmado la muerte de Sinwar tras realizarse al cadáver varias pruebas de ADN. O sea, no se ha realizado una, se han realizado varias pruebas de ADN. Por eso que toma hora. Sigamos viendo. Sin aún confirmación del resultado de estas investigaciones de laboratorio. Sinwar, cabeza de la organización desde la muerte de Ismail Haniyeh, es considerado por el ejército de Israel como organizador de los atentados del 7 de octubre del año 2023 que iniciaron el conflicto entre Hamas e Israel y que ahora abarca a numerosos países del Medio Oriente. Prácticamente la noticia está dando la vuelta al mundo, está en todas las cadenas de televisión, está también las agencias de noticias.
So he felt that time is playing into his hands. I think now their calculation will be different. And in a different calculation, it might support us in the process of going to a solution for Gaza.
That's really interesting. Look, you mentioned his brother. What do we know about his brother? Whether or not he shares the same ideology.
Otra información, esto es de la agencia de noticias AJN. Medios israelíes afirman que el líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, fue eliminado en un ataque en Gaza.
Most of them are in Qatar. There are some debates among themselves also. But no question that if he is alive, and I assume he is for the time being, that means that he will take the leadership.
Okay. Entonces, leo de nuevo, medios israelíes afirman que el líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, fue eliminado en un ataque a Gaza. La agencia AJN dice, medios de comunicación israelíes confirmaron hoy que Israel eliminó al líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, en un ataque a la franja de Gaza. Medios hebreos como Can y el canal 12 citaron a funcionarios israelíes que confirmaron la muerte de Sinwar.
With neighboring countries, as well as with some could be even a symbolic representative.
Sí, les traigo una nueva información. El gobierno de Israel estaría planificando una declaración pública
potentially
para
could be
cualquier momento,
an inflection point here, a fork in the road moment as to
el
how
gobierno
this
israelí
thing is prosecuted
va
going
a
forward. We
hacer
heard
una
earlier from
declaración
Joseph
pública.
Kukwasa,
O sea,
that this could be
ya no
a
estamos
moment of
hablando
change
de que
from
la
the
información
prosecution, saying that
saldría
his fear
de
would be
las
that this is
fuerzas
now
de
a chance
defensa
for
de
Benjamin
Israel,
Netanyahu to push
sino que
further forward
podríamos llegar a
and
tener en
make
cualquier
this
momento
a wider. What's
información
your sense as to where
directamente
this could go
del
at this moment
gobierno
and which direction we're
israelí.
going in from here on?
I think we don't push further a war because the war is today on a low level, but we are fighting against any new. Hamas is trying to recruit new people and to establish new cells of terror activists, and we are fighting against them.
Las informaciones siguen cayendo como lluvia acerca de esta noticia que está dando la vuelta al mundo. Estaríamos esperando en cualquier momento la información va a dar el gobierno de Israel.
Probably you know that Israel has left Gaza in 2005. Has left Gaza when the PA, Palestinian Authority, with Abu Mazen as their president, was the one who was responsible for Gaza.
Estamos también dando noticias de la situación que está viviendo en el Líbano. Obviamente todo es muy fresco, la tensión en el borde se va a acentuar, obviamente, pero esperaremos que nos den más informaciones al respecto.
Corruption and the inefficiency and everything, but a kind of a mandate of the region, the region, perhaps with American or EU support. This could be something for a period of time, and it trying to radicalize the people and the education system and everything, and build up.
Lo importante es lo que estamos teniendo en estos momentos. La información es que medios israelíes afirman que el líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, fue eliminado. Medios israelíes afirman que el líder de Hamas, Yahya Sinwar, fue eliminado en horas de esta mañana.
It would seem as if Benjamin Netanyahu and many within his cabinet do not want to see anything like that.
Chicos, les quiero informar que no hay información de los rehenes. Si hubiese información, yo la compartiría, obviamente si fuera oficial, pero no hay información de la parte de rehenes. Y eso es lo que en estos momentos. Voy a otro medio de comunicación. No quiero ir a... No, Twitter ya no existe, por favor. Twitter ya no existe. Estamos buscando solamente diarios electrónicos destacados y traerle la información que están partiendo estos medios. Aquí tengo el diario El Comercio de Perú.
And I do hope that we will see a kind of, but what is important, the basic should be, Hamas will not
¿Quién era Yahya Sinwar, el líder de Hamas, cerebro de la matanza del 7 de octubre en Israel? El diario El Comercio se hace eco de la información que habíamos dado al principio, una reseña biográfica de quién era el líder del grupo terrorista Hamas. Señores y señores, no lo sé si fuimos el primer canal de YouTube en traer esta información. El tema, acá no hay una competencia de quién es es el primero o el segundo, por lo menos no de mi parte. El único objetivo es traerles a ustedes la información que nos llegó de primera mano y que obviamente teníamos que traérselas a ustedes. Vamos a buscar más noticias. Vamos a buscar más noticias.
I think, first of all, we see that in both cases, in Lebanon and in Gaza, everything that was prepared in order really to annihilate Israel, this way or the other, even if not killing everyone, is now distracted, Israel is now taking care of it.
El diario 20 Minutos, otro diario electrónico al cual yo sigo siempre, es bastante serio y dice
military construction, mostly underground. Things that have been found in Lebanon are much more sophisticated than those in Gaza. Gaza is a small one and it's very
señoras y señores,
on our border and everything, but in what we found in Lebanon,
señoras y señores, gente de
and this cannot remain.
El Monedero Lleno, que ha estado con nosotros y que sigue en sintonía. Israel confirma haber matado al máximo líder de Hamas, cerebro del 7 de octubre. Repito, Israel confirma haber matado al máximo líder de Hamas, cerebro del 7 de octubre. El primer ministro Netanyahu dará un comunicado dentro de las próximas horas. Dentro de las próximas horas, Benjamín Netanyahu estaría dando la noticia que todo el mundo sabe, la confirmación de que se ha pegado hoy día en la mañana un espolonazo a la agrupación terrorista Hamas con la muerte de Yahya Sinwar. Estamos viendo en pantalla imágenes de cómo Sinwar caminaba por las calles de Gaza libremente, sin ningún tipo de preocupación, pero esas imágenes son imágenes que corresponden a el año antes pasado, no es información de ahora, o sea, la situación ha cambiado increíblemente y todos lo sabemos. Israel acaba de confirmar que se ha eliminado a Sinwar. La noticia está dando la vuelta al mundo. ¿Qué vendrá ahora en la franja de Gaza? ¿Qué vendrá ahora en la guerra con el Líbano? ¿Qué vendrá ahora en la guerra contra Irán? ¿Atacará Irán? ¿O Israel se va a aguantar de atacar Irán por el momento? ¿Se juntará la guerra que se está desarrollando en Europa entre Rusia con Ucrania? ¿Se llegará a juntar con la guerra que se está viviendo en el Medio Oriente? No se olviden que se han encontrado en las últimas horas armamento proveniente de Rusia en el Líbano. Se ha encontrado armamento de Rusia en el Líbano. Y eso es mucho. Eso quiere decir mucho, porque aunque ustedes no lo crean, se negaba
Sinwar's
que esta
position
situación
to
existiera.
hold firm on ceasefire
Ahora, lo
negotiations from
importante
his point
es
of view, in the hope that Israel
las
would be dragged into a
reacciones
long
de cada
and bloody
uno
conflict with Hamas's
de los
allies,
puntos
Hezbollah, and it would further degrade
porque si
Israel's
se
capability to operate
logra
within Gaza.
hacer
And
una
so,
conexión bélica
many people
entre los dos
blame
sectores, mamma mía, yo creo que la cosa se pondría complicada en muchos sentidos. Lo hemos analizado en el monedero lleno, en sus videos, lo hemos hecho en el tema del alza del petróleo, en el tema de la inflación, en el tema de la situación económica de China, de la situación económica de Estados Unidos, que están por enfrentar su elección a presidente dentro de las próximas semanas, que obviamente invito a que unan a nuestro canal, al monedero lleno, para que vean en América XXI, nuestro canal de noticias, para que vean obviamente el análisis de los resultados de esa elección. Lo vamos a hacer en vivo y en directo, vamos analizando los resultados de la elección entre Trump y pero obviamente el tema de geopolítica tiene que estar presente en nuestro.
A moment to check with your sources as well, because I want to bring viewers the latest post on X from the Israel Defense Forces on exactly this topic. I'm going to read it out in full, Ali. Look, it says, during IDF operations in Gaza, 3 terrorists were eliminated. The IDF
Para los que se están sumando a nuestra transmisión, quiero decirles que mi nombre es Rini, estamos en el América XXI, en el monedero lleno, transmitiendo en directo la noticia que está dando la vuelta al mundo. Israel confirma haber matado en Gaza a Sinwar, líder de Hamas, cerebro del atentado del 7 de octubre. Un golpe a la mesa de Israel. No me paro de cansar de decirlo porque lo voy a decir cuando vino el tema del Mossad, cuando hizo la operación Vivo,
And are we entirely clear exactly whereabouts this operation that killed these 3, may have included Sinwar, took place?
La verdad es que no me lo esperaba.
I don't know for sure. There are some rumors that the operation might have been in southern Gaza around the Rafah area, but I don't know that to be absolutely certain.
Pero no. No
That is
estaba
just
en
something I'd heard on the
tampoco
side, but
estaba
again,
rodeado
like a lot of what's coming out now, that is unconfirmed.
de rehenes, como se decía.
Confirmation now. The Israelis, I suspect, if it is Sinwar, will be able
fue
to
un
do
bombardeo
some pretty
a
rapid
una escuela
forensic testing on
donde
him. Sinwar was
obviamente
held
que
in
tenían
Israeli
información
jails
de que había
for a long time
un grupo
because of his
de
involvement
terroristas
with
en esa zona,
Hamas.
la
And
cual
attacks on
fue
Israeli
atacada,
forces and
y
civilians. He was
cuando
released as part of a major hostage deal with the swap with Gilad Shalit, the Israeli soldier, some years back. And Sinwar was amongst more than 1,000 Palestinian prisoners released. He went back to Gaza.
De que una de las personas
and he rose from the
fuera
ranks of Hamas
Yahya
to become ultimately its leader. And so I'm guessing here that given that he was previously in Israeli detention for many years, I suspect they probably have some form of DNA that they could try and match, and I think they will be pretty keen to try and establish the facts behind this and announce it if it does turn out to be true. Sinwar had learned during his time in prison,
con respecto a lo que está pasando en Israel en estos momentos.
Excellent speaker of Hebrew, and he did it
Hay
to try
una reunión de emergencia del gabinete de
and to
Netanyahu
understand them
que era de
better.
esperar.
We've heard reports from some of the hostages who have been released over recent months who did see Sinwar.
No tengo imágenes
Sinwar visited them when he was keeping them hostage in Gaza, and they report that he would speak to them in Hebrew. So he
La
was
cadena
someone
Sky
who
News
spent
con respecto
years
a lo que me
trying
están
to
informando, y obviamente
the
le están
psyche
informando todo,
behind
de
Israel
lo
and
que está
Israelis,
pasando
understand the
en
Jewish
la
faith better in
investigación
order to ultimately
de el
try and eliminate the
supuesto
presence
cadáver
of Israel.
fue encontrado esta mañana tras ser abatido en el enfrentamiento entre las IF y un grupo iraquí donde 3 terroristas fueron dados de baja, 3 terroristas fueron dados de baja y uno de ellos correspondería a Sinwar. Quiero dar las gracias a todas las personas que nos han seguido en esta transmisión bastante improvisada, ni siquiera he tenido cámara puesta. Quiero mandar un abrazo fraterno a todos ustedes por haberme acompañado en esta transmisión. Vamos a seguir esta información con mayores detalles respecto a lo que vaya a pasar dentro de las próximas horas. Y bueno, la invitación queda abierta para que se unan al monedero lleno y estén atentos a los directos de América XXI. Les mando un abrazo fraterno a todos. Mi nombre es Emilio Papelini.
Well, I mean, as a rule, yes, but I think we should view what has happened in Gaza and to Hamas over the last 12 and a bit months slightly differently. You know, Gaza is a place that has been in parts totally flattened. I've seen it for myself, totally flattened. A place like Rafah and Khan Yunis, the Israeli military occupy much